what most people do, if they're doing the webinar, balancing brand and demand, they're educating, but they're also looking to convert the audience. They plan the webinar, they try and get people there. They maybe have a call to action during the live event, but maybe they squeeze it in at the end. They're like, oh, if you want some more help, call us. So there's a little bit around not only the placement of your CTA or that call to action, but what is that call to action and how do you present it?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. Very excited about today's guests. Obviously, I'm joined by Jody Grundon as always, and he'll be asking lots of great questions about this topic. We're going to be talking about webinars and how to get sales from webinars. And so very excited. I know we've tried this many times with some success, but not as much success as I'm sure Lyle can help us get. But we are joined by Logan Lyles from DemandShift. So Logan, welcome to the show and tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Always a good time chatting with you, Jamie and Jody. Yeah, I am the founder of DemandShift. I launched it in the summer of last year as a specialized agency doing done-for-you webinar series for B2B brands, and that came out of my experience both agency side and as an in-house marketer. We can maybe get into the story a little bit about how I actually flopped with webinars for about 2 years when I looked at the direct attribution to pipeline and those core KPIs that you should be driving with webinars that I really wasn't happy with. So I set about kind of tweaking the different parts of how I ran webinars over about 6 months. And I ended up 5Xing my results when I looked at that conversion rate from webinar signups to booked sales calls. And so I thought, hey, there's something here. So when I launched my own agency, DemandShift, last year, that's been the core offer. So I do have some folks where I do some consulting. Most of our clients, we're doing the full done for you, what we call our webinar fast track service.
So with webinars, so can you tell me because we do webinars as well. So we do two types of webinars. We do one for the accounting industry to really kind of teach the accounting industry how we do what we do with the virtual CFO side, because a lot of folks out there have a lot of accounting firms have an issue trying to scale it, and we've done a great job with it and high client satisfaction, all that kind of stuff. But to put it in a webinar and to show people that's one thing. So it's really informative. The second type of webinar we do is really towards different industries that we work with, whether that's the creative agency industry or law industry or transportation. We'll do specific for those industries but the goal, one, to educate, but then two, to get opportunities to, for clients, some leads and clients. So kind of, yeah, I'm sure there's a different way of approaching each one, or maybe not. Maybe you approach it the same. So I'd love to hear your insights on that.
Yeah, I think that in both of y'all's cases, you are probably trying to do what we do for a lot of our clients, Jody, and that is balance brand and demand with your webinars, right? They're not just a sales pitch like, hey, come join our webinar. It's basically a group sales call that you didn't know you were signing up for, right? I think the danger on the other side, though, is that you're just being so broadly educational and you're not making the next step clear, so that you're doing some good brand work and maybe building trust and authority and some likability with your audience, but it's not driving pipeline. And that's really the end of the spectrum that I fell on for 2 years. I was running monthly webinars and we saw people showing up, good attendance rate, good registration, but we were hitting what I call the conversion cliff. There are really two problems I see often with webinars. It's either this conversion cliff or what we call the registration rut. Registration rut kind of preempts the conversion cliff. It's, hey, we can't get enough people signed up to make this even worth it, right? Because webinars are a lot of work. We got to decide on a title. We got to prep speakers. Maybe we got to build a deck. We got to promote for a few weeks. We got to actually deliver good content. We've got to figure out our sign up flow or follow up sequences, all of those sorts of things. So if you're going to put in all of that work, one, you got to make sure you get enough people signed up, which unfortunately a lot of people are struggling with that. And that's what we call the registration rut. Secondly, even if you are getting enough people signed up, if you're not converting that into enough pipeline, enough booked sales calls to make it worth it based on your sales process, your close rate, your ACV, let's say, then that conversion cliff really can be a killer to your webinar program as well. And so I think the way that you solve both of those are having an ongoing webinar series that is educational, but you have very clear, distinct, and attractive offers for people to take that next step. You've got to make your CTA clear. And there's some hidden things I found where the placement of the CTA in some unexpected spots actually helped me with that. But we can get to that in a second. But to answer your first question, I think you can do it the way that you guys are talking about, where it can be educational, but still drive pipeline if you're balancing that brand and demand the right way.
So if you're going to be doing, what you're proposing is, okay, we're going to do a monthly webinar and we're going to have a built-in audience because it's going to be the same audience almost every month, or the same type of audience. So they know that it's expected and it's predictable. How do you keep those people interested, and how do you keep the content going? Because that's what I'd worry about. If we were doing a monthly webinar, it's okay, every month we have to come up with something new and creative to present to the same audience.
Mm-hmm. Well, how do you guys do your planning for the podcast? Let me ask that question. I'll turn it around, and then we can we can go from there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a fully dedicated, who you met prior to this show. So Roxanne really is the one who keeps us fresh, because if it was Jody and I doing it, we would never find guests and we would never record. So she babysits us and makes sure that we have fresh content all the time. And a lot of it does depend on the guests. When a guest comes to us, or oftentimes Jody and I will meet someone at a conference and we're like, yes, we want to get this person on our podcast. They're interesting. They have something fun to talk about. So a lot of times we'll just reach out to her and be like, hey, we have to have Logan on the show. He's great. We want to talk to him. And so that's usually how we keep the topics, is based on the people that we can find.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very similar for webinars, right? You can start with the topic. You can say, hey, these are the things that are trending in our industry. These are the common problems that our clients, our prospects, other folks in our space are talking about. Let's talk about those problems and the ways that we found to solve them. So you can kind of go topic first. You can also go guest first. You can say, hey, we want to highlight this customer story, or we have someone else in the industry just like this conversation came about. So I would say very similar to running your podcast. You can do your planning for a webinar the very same way. And I came to webinars through podcasting because I spent 4 years at a podcast production agency. I think I was there at Sweetfish the last time I was on the show here. Went in-house and then back agency side. And I think that experience at Sweetfish is just kind of ruined me for podcasting, because now when I run webinars, I'm like, we don't have to have a deck. We could do this conversationally and do an interview as opposed to just a talking head with slides. And people look at me like, wait, can we do that? This is a webinar. That's not what webinars. And to me, a webinar is very similar to a podcast. It's audio, it's video. It can be solo or conversational. It can have visuals or not. The main difference is that you're having people sign up to join you live, right? Yep. And so I see webinars as basically an extension of the podcast. It just happens to be live. In fact, the platform I'm using now to run my webinars, host it as a podcast, and live stream it to LinkedIn, Riverside, it's one platform, and I'm doing all three at once. So I'm like, what do I call it? Do I call it a podcast, a webinar, a live stream, a podcast live web stream? No, that's terrible. Don't do that. But anyway, that convergence is really real. At least it has been for me and a lot of our clients that we're running for at DemandShift right now.
I never thought about webinars without having slides. That's super interesting. Basically it's just like this, but the only difference is we'd have 20 people on the 20 people that are invited, 20 people that are listening and watching us talk. And then would there be participation where we had asked them questions and they'd respond back, or would it just simply be the three of us? What's your typical?
Yeah. So you don't necessarily have to do that, but I think that's one of the benefits of the live format. So I think what you get with a webinar that you don't get with an asynchronous podcast, right, is you get people signing up. So you get an idea. Well, one, you get a better idea of who those people are, and you have the opportunity to follow up with them via email, which I don't care what anybody says. SEO is dead. Email's dead. Email's not dead. That is still, one of the best ways to make sure that you can stay in touch with people. And in B2B of any kind, whether you're an accounting firm or a creative agency, you don't want to be reliant on other channels like social only to be able to reach your audience, because those algorithms can change, right? So a webinar, you capture their email, but then to your point, Jody, you can get that live interaction, people in the chat asking good questions, and that has a few benefits. One, it's a shorter feedback loop with your audience, right? Instead of like, hey, we record this podcast 2-3 weeks later, it goes out. People don't have that option to just like comment in Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever they listen to their podcast. On a live webinar, they do. And so you see what's resonating, you see what people are asking, you see what's unclear to people. Another thing I like to do is, let's say you do a 45-minute, hour-long webinar, you could run them 30 minutes. A webinar doesn't have to have slides and it doesn't have to be an hour. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But whatever your length is, plan out 2-3 polls that you're going to launch, because there's going to be a higher percentage of people who are willing to click a button and answer a question than to engage in the chat. That's just the way it goes, right? That's another feedback loop, to see what's resonating. And that can not only create a deeper connection with your audience because they see you responding to them in real time. You can call them out in the chat, be like, oh, Jamie just asked a great question. Jamie, thank you for that, right? How much more engaging with them as a person is that than just hearing your voice or seeing you on video, which is a step in the right direction, don't get me wrong, but you can take it to a new level when you've got that live audience to engage with.
Would that be similar to a town? Because we do like we call the town hall where we invite people that take our accounting course. We have an open question, I guess, where anybody can show up, and then our CFOs will answer questions, for them, directly. And we might have 5 to 10 different firms show up and ask different questions, and so it's an interactive thing. Is that very similar to what we're talking about there? I don't think there's any slides, and occasionally there's going to be guests. We might bring somebody from marketing in or whatever. But it sounds like that might be, that's kind of very similar, I guess. We might be doing that and not realizing it, and really not advertising for it, I guess.
Yeah, I think this format, can be called a lot of different things: a webinar, a town hall, a masterclass, a virtual roundtable, right? A virtual event. Anytime you're having people give you their email to sign up for, something live that's delivered virtually, audio and video. I mean, that is what we're talking about here when we say a webinar. All the other things are just kind of you're choosing your delivery mechanism.
So streaming on LinkedIn is not an example of what we're talking about, where you just simply, hey, we're going to go live on LinkedIn and it's just the two of us talking through a podcast. That's not really the same thing because there's really no interaction. You're not inviting people to it. There's not a platform that they can ask questions. It's just more they're hearing it live. Would that be the distinction?
I mean, yeah, actually, all of our webinars right now at DemandShift, we do stream to LinkedIn Live at the same time. So we have people live in the studio who can engage in chat, answer those poll questions. They can even come up on stage and they can come on camera and ask their question, which is kind of fun and different than just like a Zoom webinar. But then when we do live stream to LinkedIn Live, people aren't signing up with their email, but they can engage in the chat in real time. They can, leave comments on that LinkedIn Live that you can see and then you can respond to. So I would say that's we use that as an extension of the webinar, because platforms like Riverside that we use make it to where it can be yes and, not either or. Then I'm like, yes, let's do that too. But the process of getting people to give you their email when they sign up for the event, town hall, masterclass, virtual event, webinar, whatever we're calling it, that is really where the missed opportunity is and where I found that those 5x results. Because what most people do, if they're doing the webinar, balancing brand and demand, they're educating, but they're also looking to convert the audience. They plan the webinar, they try and get people there. They maybe have a call to action during the live event, but maybe they squeeze it in at the end after the CTA and they're like, oh, if you want some more help, like call us. Why? who do I call? How do I contact you? What am I going to get out of contacting you, right? So there's a little bit around not only the placement of your CTA or that call to action, but what is that call to action and how do you present it? So we could talk about both of those, but the big mistake people make is kind of squeezing in that CTA at the end. And then the main area where they try and convert people is after the webinar, and they enroll them in some sort of email sequence, which 90% or more of people just ignore, right? What we found is that sign up process, when someone is willing to give you their email, which people know these days, like gated content isn't the same as it was 10, 15 years ago. It's like, oh, yeah, there's a cost, I know, to giving you my email, right? What are you going to do with it? How many times are you going to email me? Am I going to get blown up in my inbox? But if someone's willing to give you their email for that webinar, there's an opportunity there. And what we've implemented is what we call our two-step sign-up process that gives people an opportunity to convert right at that time when they're signing up for the webinar. And that's led us to driving book sales calls and pipeline with folks that never even attend the live event. So we can talk about that a little bit more, but I'm sure you guys might have some questions around like kind of CTA that I was talking about there.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in the CTA because as you're talking through it, I'm thinking, okay, if I'm doing a webinar and it went great. We had a great conversation. Just like, let's assume this is the webinar. The three of us are talking. This is going really well. We have audience questions. We have audience interactions. And I like the idea of thinking of it as a live podcast, right? Because obviously a lot of the podcasters I listen to do the live podcast. And what makes that more fun and more interesting is the audience reaction. Like you can hear the audience laughing, you can hear the audience ask questions, and just like that makes it a little bit different of a podcast. So if this was let's say this was a live webinar instead of a recorded podcast, what types of CTA could we start offering to the audience so they would be more likely to follow up with us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that we do is we design the poll questions and some survey questions for the audience that kind of fall in two buckets. The first set of questions are qualification questions, and the second step are more discovery and kind of probing for pain point sort of questions. And we put those both in a survey and in our poll questions during the live event. And when I mentioned the survey, this is the second step of what I alluded to earlier in that two-step sign-up process. So typically what we'll do is, with a webinar, you've got to have a landing page and a form somewhere where people sign up, right? So that they can get the calendar invite, you can see they've registered, they can get the reminder emails, those sorts of things. The big mistake most people make is they use Zoom or whatever webinar platform they use their registration page, which you don't have any control over, not just from a branding perspective and a conversion rate optimization, but you don't have any control over what happens after they give you their email address, right? And while we've done some studies on this, we surveyed about 250 B2B marketers last year on their webinar stats. The average is about 35% of people who sign up for a webinar versus the ones that actually attend, right? Well, that means if you're a CTA and the prompt that you're giving someone to respond and take the next step is only during that live event, you're missing 65% of your swings. Like you're not even getting all the at-bats that you could. And so we call it a two-step sign-up process because we have the registration page. And then right after that registration page, we don't just do a bland thank you message. We say, hey, complete your registration by answering a few more questions. And that is the lead into the survey, which is usually about 6 to 8 questions. It starts with some of those easy to answer questions, which is good for the registrant, but it's also good for us because it kind of qualifies them, right? Do you only work with businesses in North America? Well, make that your first question. Are you in North America, EMEA, APAC, whatever? What's your role or your seniority level? Okay, that's easy to answer. How many people do you have in your company? And then you start. Let's say we're having a webinar about webinars. To maybe this is like Kramer with the coffee table book about coffee table books back in the day on Seinfeld. If I'm having a webinar about webinars, I might ask, hey, are you currently running webinars, right? What's your conversion rate to pipeline? Is it 1%, 2%, 5, 10? I don't know. Right now I'm starting to understand their pain points. Do they have a pain around conversion? Those sorts of things. And then I end the survey with a call to action that says, hey, would you like to book a call with a team who runs done for you webinar series that book 5 times more sales calls than the average B2B webinar program? And if they say yes, then I immediately show them my calendar and they're able to book a sales call with me. And so you could see how you guys could, it would be different questions and it would be a different CTA, but that flow could help you convert folks at the moment of interest, at the moment of registration, rather than waiting and trying to get everybody you can to the webinar, even though it's never going to be 100%, and then sending them emails and saying, hey, did you find it interesting? Could we help you, right? What you want to do is ask the question sooner, which I was afraid would kind of turn people off and be too pushy. But the data shows that when done correctly, this engages people more. And back to your original question, Jamie, how do you ask the question? Well, you inlay the question with the outcome, right? As opposed to like, hey, do you want to book a call? It's, hey, would you like to learn about a framework that books 5 times more sales calls by running webinars using, this framework? That's not exactly right, but you wordsmith it a little bit. But see how it's not just, hey, do you want to do this? It's, would you like to do this so that you get this? And so coming up with that same outcome-based question really took me a long time to get there, but that's the short answer to your real question there.
As a follow-up question is does that mean every one of your webinars is about webinars? Or because I'm thinking for us, we have a maturity model and that's what brings a lot of people to us. And so the question might be, do you want to learn about your financial maturity? But then the webinar might be a completely different topic, because we're doing different topics every time. So would that be weird, or how does those two connect?
Yeah. So, at times you might want to customize your survey and what that call to action is, right? Like if you're a creative agency and you have a number of different services from SEO to web design to social ad campaigns, right? You might not have to change the initial qualification questions, but then the discovery question and then the CTA question are likely going to be different. And then if you really want to optimize for conversion, the calendar booking page that you land them on should also be customized as well. So it takes a little more work, but if you think about it like, hey, we kind of have 3 buckets of things that we're talking about, and as they relate to our different services, I only have to do that once. And so maybe I have a calendar page that is like, would you like to book a call with a team that, builds high converting websites, or, whatever the service and the offer is. And then you have that calendar booking page, the name of that is related to the outcome that you're going to help them drive by engaging with you.
Yeah. Interesting.
So then, my curiosity pretty much flowing here. So it sounds like for those folks that are coming into the webinar that were converting, some of them, before they actually even go to the webinar, they have to really be super qualified coming in. I mean, they have to be people that saw something that's super exciting to them, or maybe very familiar with the firm, especially in the financial aspect, because we help. We're the CFO, so we control all the finances of the company, or really help with the finances of the company type of thing. So there's got to be a lot of trust developed, ahead of time. Do you see that? Would there be any stumbling blocks if we were to do that type of service versus a marketing firm doing it, or maybe there's no difference?
Yeah, no, I think one of the great things about having this 2-step sign up process in the survey, I've used a few different tools to do this, but most survey tools have some sort of logic that you can leverage, right? Like if this question is answered this way, then skip this question or route them this way. And so what we do a lot with our clients, Jody, is we will design their survey not only with these qualifying questions and then the discovery questions and the final CTA, but we will also use it to disqualify anyone who's coming in who isn't a fit. Let's say you guys primarily work with agencies, once they reach the $1 million run rate, or, whatever that, or 5 employees or whatever it is, right? So you could actually, if someone were taking that survey and they're not qualified yet, instead of directing them to the final question and giving them the option to book a call, which might be a waste of time for them and you, right? Because even no matter how good your targeting is on social and with email as you promote it, you're going to have people come through who aren't necessarily qualified. Have them qualify themselves with that survey, but don't just like discard them. have them then go to maybe an introduction to your financial maturity model, right? Like they registered for this webinar and they've just told you, well, we're a sub $1 million agency. What content could you put in front of them in addition to the webinar that they're going to attend that could help them grow, that could help them turn into a qualified prospect for you guys down the road? And so you could have a custom ending for those folks who aren't necessarily qualified yet.
Yeah, no, I think that's great because we do a couple of those things with like the maturity model quiz. To be honest, like depending on how you answer the first couple questions, the questions come in different orders and they different things pop out of it. So I think that's definitely makes a lot of sense. Okay, so yeah, one final question before we get to our fun question would be is if I am a marketing agency or an agency listening to this and I'm like, wow, I think this is great. I want to start doing webinars. I've always kind of wanted to do podcasting and I think live is really cool. I could do all three in one. What would be the next step I would take to kind of go down that path?
Yeah, so I would run a test and host your first webinar. I would think about the how you're going to get it in front of kind of a minimally viable audience, and so I would start to look at two things. You need to have a compelling topic, and then you need to have a distribution plan of how are you going to get this in front of people, right? And so I actually have a prompt that if you go to demandshift.co/prompt, and maybe we can put that in the show notes of today's podcast. It's designed to do some audience research and surface the 12 most common questions that your ICP is asking about your niche or in your industry. And I would take that sort of research and I would pick the most burning question that you think is going to drive the most interest and design a webinar around answering that question as best you can in 30, 45, 60 minutes, right? So that's kind of where I would start with planning and topic. And again, that's at demandshift.co/prompt. Then I would think about what is going to be my distribution plan. And I think of primarily two buckets, email and social. So email, what does your current email list look like? Make sure that you hit them up, with the webinar. The other piece that a lot of people don't think of is, well, I don't have a really big email list. So like, how else can I drive attendance via email? Well, you probably have partners or folks that are complementary to you in your space that maybe have bigger email lists. And you'd be surprised how many people you go to and say, hey, we're hosting this webinar. Would you mind plugging it to your email list and your newsletter or doing a dedicated send? And maybe you need to do something reciprocal for them, right? But more often than not, you can find those opportunities if you just ask and kind of make a quick list. So that would be my email strategy. And then social, I would post about it on LinkedIn, obviously, but I would create an event on LinkedIn on your company page. And what a lot of people don't know is then when you list yourself as a speaker, you can send event invites. So these aren't DMs, and they're not connection requests. They're kind of in between. They allow you to go to that event after you've created it, pull up all your first degree connections, and you can manually pick people, or you can filter them by industry and geo and mass send invites. And I love the way it comes across. It's like a connection request. It's like, hey, Jamie, Logan's hosting a webinar about in-person events and live streaming. Do you want to attend? And it would give you, Jamie, a little X and a little check. That strategy alone can be a great one to drive more webinar signups, bridging that gap between LinkedIn and your webinar. So I would look at kind of some low-hanging fruit there, run that first topic, and then see what sort of engagement that you get.
Yeah, it's a great starting point. I think a lot of our clients, a lot of people listening to this are going to be like, "Oh, it's actually a little easier than I thought." And it can kill like three birds with one stone too. And I think that's what a lot of people I can't tell you that people I've talked to be like, ask us questions about our podcast and like, how do you get guests and how do you do these things? And like, if you're doing all three at once, I think that's pretty awesome. So I wanted to
before we get to that question there, Logan. I mean, when we as we educate our prospective clients, we basically should show them everything. Here's the blueprint. Here's how you do it. Knowing that, maybe a quarter of those folks are going to be able to do it on their own, and high five to those, thumbs up, that's a victory all by itself, just helping somebody else out. But then you get the other, 75% that, may need some help, and it sounds like this is a similar situation where, it sounds like a great story and I'll bet you I could do it all by myself. But, it's probably a lot easier getting, somebody like yourself. How would somebody get a hold of you, and how would that work? Can you kind of walk through the steps there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll answer this question. And this is also something really good to think about as you close out your webinars. I love to frame it this way of like, hey, this has been great. You've probably gotten some value. Your curiosity is spinning, like Jody, you said earlier. One of three things is going to happen. The first, I hope it doesn't, but statistically, it's probably going to be most likely you do nothing. And that would be really unfortunate, right? The second option is you're going to do it yourself. Like you said, Jody, maybe that's 25% of you. And I would encourage you, if you're kind of heading down that path, again, go to demandshift.co/prompt. And then you give people, well, the third option is you might need some help. You might need someone to do it for you, or at least do it with you. And if that's the case for somebody listening to this around webinars, you can go to demandshift.co and you can see there, our pricing, the packaging, what we deliver, some examples, and you can book a call with me directly. So if you're looking for that done for you or done with you help, that's the quickest way to do it. But even in that answer, I want you guys to listen to kind of how that 3-step framing, that's how I end most of our client webinars, with that 3-step CTA. And that way it doesn't feel too pushy. It feels very natural. It feels like, yeah, that does make sense. Like, what other option is there? There's one of those three. And so now I'm not analysis paralysis or like, oh, maybe I'll reach out. It's like, what path do I want to take? You're giving me three very clear options.
That was perfect delivery. I can tell you practiced it, but yeah, and I think even as you're talking about it, I see a lot of people probably going down that second path, getting halfway through it and being like, okay, this is harder than I thought. Now I have to go back and listen to that again. How do I find Logan? So I can definitely, that was a great delivery. It's awesome.
Love it.
Cool. So yeah, like I said, I promise we're gonna get to our fun question here. So this might be unique to me, but I'm gonna make you guys answer it anyways. So we talked a little bit about live, and I talked about live podcasts. So I've been lucky to go to a live podcast. So the question is gonna be, if you've been to a live podcast, which one have you been to? And if you haven't, which podcast would you love to see live? So I'm gonna answer first because I know it's probably kind of a tricky question. And I was traveling to New York for a conference that we were attending, and I happened to find out that my favorite podcast, The Rewatchables, was doing a live podcast in New York the night before I arrived. And so I was able to go and see them do a live Rewatchables podcast, and they covered Silence of the Lambs, which is another one of my favorite movies. And so it was really cool to be part of that audience. And I went by myself, ended up meeting some people that had common interests in me, hung out with them in New York that night. And so it was a really cool experience, not only for the show, but just kind of for how it played out, because you're in a room with a lot of people that have similar interests to you. And for that case, it was movies and horror movies. But yeah, that was a really cool live podcast for me. So Jody, if you were to if you've attended a live podcast, or if there's a podcast you'd love to see live, what would you choose?
Well, first of all, I didn't know that even existed. That's
I figured as much.
you actually have an audience. That'd be kind of interesting in person. I had to think about that. Joe Rogan is somebody great, but I'd love to see Pat McAfee if I could actually see that show. I know it's not a podcast, but that show being part of that'd be a lot of fun. I'm a huge football fan, huge Colts fan, and it just would be fun being around that. So I know that probably didn't answer it exactly, but that's probably who I go with, a sports figure.
Yeah, that's good. Logan, what about you?
That's awesome, Jody. I'll round it out, and this one will be, somewhat boring. So I'll stay in kind of the B2B space, but one of another agency owner I know really well, have done some content with, and I really love the way that he runs their LinkedIn Live and webinars, is Justin Rowe. His last name's Rowe. He is like my go-to expert on LinkedIn ads, and their live streams that they put on are always really, really good. Sometimes like no deck, we're just gonna pull up our screen and start doing stuff. He did one on using Claude Code for marketing the other day. It was like no deck. We're just going to pull up, share a screen, go from there. And so I love attending his live streams when I'm on the other side of the mic, or well, not on the mic, right? On the other side of the live stream podcast or webinar.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's I'm gonna check him out. But I think I'm sure a lot of our audience will check him out too. So appreciate you pointing us in his direction. So yeah, this is a really informative episode. Like I said, I know I could see Jody's wheels turning already, and he might be like holding us after this call to talk about our podcasting methodology here. But yeah, really appreciate the webinar discussion, and I'm sure a lot of our audience are feeling the same way. So appreciate both of you guys.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thank you.